wanted to try and get our dream house. And it became a block of land plus a kuminka. One of the conditions is that you can't visit the property.
It's an actual condition that you are not allowed to visit and see the place
Yeah,
you might purchase.
that's right. The auction went by and no one bid on it because the condition of the place actually was completely overgrown. Suddenly came out of bushes and trees, came to the clearing, and then suddenly there was the house. Look up and
Hey there, and thank you for tuning in. We're excited to bring you another great conversation today. If you like the show and want to support us, please hit the subscribe button so we can keep bringing you great content week after week. And if you're feeling extra generous, give this video a like and share your thoughts and comments down below. Thank you so much. And now, let's get into it. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we are welcoming Jaya. Thank you so much for coming all the way to Osaka from Ibaraki. You're known online as Tokyo Llama. You have documented your long process of renovating a very beautiful kominka, Akiya, that you have found in that prefecture. And we're going to kind of go back on that journey with you and what you've learned from it and what you can maybe share with others that are interested in this. Thank you so much. And like with all our guests, I want to go back to the very beginning with what brought you here in the first place? How did you arrive to Japan?
well, it's quite a long story. If you go back right to the beginning, I first studied Japanese when I was a high school student back in Melbourne, Australia, where I grew up, and I really enjoyed it. And at that time, we also had a chance to do a 3-week kind of school trip, which was quite nice. I think I would have been about 14 or 15 or so, and we came to Japan. 40 kids or so, and we had a great time. I really enjoyed it, and I always thought I want to come back to Japan one day. So fast forward to university, and I studied a little bit of Japanese there, but I didn't really follow through with it that much, and forgot most of my Japanese. And after working a couple of years after graduating university, I worked in Australia for a few years. Thought, okay, I want to go off and travel again. And so first stop, I thought, well, go on a working holiday to Japan. So I came to Japan, Tokyo. This was about 2003. Yeah, 2003, came to Japan on a working holiday. Really enjoyed it. Ended up staying for about 2 years or just under 2 years. At that time, I also met my wife, my future wife, who was Japanese, and she was from Ibaraki, which is the Ibaraki connection there. And so we got married, and I didn't really want to stay in Japan at that time, just professionally. I didn't think there was much for me. I was teaching English mainly on a working holiday. And so we moved to London.
Okay.
Yeah, so we moved to London, and we were there about 10 years. We had 2 children, twin boys, and they were sort of just starting primary school. And in the UK, you start primary school around 4 years old. It's a couple of years younger than in Japan. And, a couple of years of doing that, we sort of realized that we're going to have to make a decision. We're going to stay in England, which we really liked, but it was quite far from my wife's mother in Japan and my parents and family in Melbourne, Australia. So we sort of decided, well, what are we going to do? We're going to stay in England? Are we going to move to Australia? We're going to move to Japan? And so we decided, I think, looking at property prices and what we would be able to afford, either in England, in Australia, and Japan. Japan just came out the winner. That's when I first sort of heard about Akiya, and when I was researching the move to Japan. And then, so we decided, actually, we'll move to Japan. It'll be easier to get set up. My wife's mother had a big enough house that we could at least stay in initially. So we did that, moved over. And yeah, that was 2017. We moved to Japan.
So when you originally were here on a working holiday visa and decided not to stay, you were not so sure about career opportunities for you here in Japan. what ended up bringing you back was an interest in property prices here. What was the career angle then for you on this kind of second time around moving to Japan?
Well, there was no career angle at that stage. So I'd been running my own business in London at the time, and it was going okay, but it plateaued out a bit. And we were thinking, well, if we're going to move, uh, probably going to be a good time at that point where the kids were 6. They're twin boys, so they were 6. They had a bit of Japanese. My wife spoke Japanese to them in the house. Obviously, English at that time was their strongest language. And so, what we decided then was, and my wife was working at a Japanese company in London at the time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so and then she sort of communicated to them that she was thinking about moving back to Japan, and they were good enough to offer her a position at the head office in Tokyo. And so we thought, well, it's a good opportunity to go back. And then, sort of for me, at that stage, well, I'd sort of already run my own business and set up a business, and I thought, well, I'll come over and just see what happens. I'll spend the first couple of months or first 6 months or so trying to learn Japanese again. I'd forgotten most of it. I'd studied it when I was on the working holiday pretty hard, but 10 years not really using it that much. I hadn't really remembered very much at all. So I was going to focus on that. My mother-in-law ran a kisaten, a Japanese traditional cafe, and so she said, "Oh, you can just work in there." So I was doing that, just sort of waitering, practicing Japanese, talking to
That's
customers.
a good place to practice.
It came in handy later because I got to know quite a few people in the community, my mother-in-law's friends and so on. So I think probably we'll talk about it maybe later. That really helped when we were getting the house in order and cleaning it up.
How difficult was it to move across continents with a family, and especially 2 young boys who up until there were like in this English school system and suddenly had to adapt to the Japanese school system, which is quite different, where they kind of had to pick up a lot of different social norms maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. I think kids at that age are pretty adaptable, and they sort of don't really think too deeply about it. It was quite funny because I mentioned that in England they start primary school a couple of years earlier than Japanese. So they'd done 2 years of primary school, 2 and a bit years primary school in England, and they came to Japan and went back to kindergarten. They were too young for they were too young for Japanese elementary school, which starts at 6. So they went to kindergarten for 6 months, which played into the timing. We wanted to get them into Japan to settle before starting primary school or elementary school. So it was kind of a deliberate move to get them 6 months in kindergarten, and with their Japanese, it was amazing. And in 6 months, they're pretty much fluent again. So they, hit the ground running when they started primary school.
So the kids are adapting to the new school. Your wife is kind of transferring her job, and you are kind of in between. But what interested you in that move at the time was properties in Japan.
Yeah, finally, it wasn't just properties. It actually wasn't so much the house. I think I'm trying to. It's quite a while ago, so it was houses that I was interested in. But I also thought in this area where we are, where my wife grew up, it's quite run down. A lot of parts are run down, like you see once you get out of the main cities, or even in the main cities on the outskirts. You see quite a lot of rundown buildings and houses. So I actually thought it would be a good place to start a business, in terms of whether that be workshop or warehousing or something like that. Just
to kind of take advantage of these empty buildings to kind of offer new services.
Yeah, so I hadn't really thought what I was going to do. So I had been working in e-commerce before. So I thought, well, I could do something like that. Perhaps, look around the area to see if there's space available that would be quite cheap or even free, perhaps, that I could, once I sort of established myself in Japan, could then start something at that point.
You said that this is the first time in that research that you kind of came across the term of Akiya. Recently, there has been a big boom, and that word has been kind of displayed everywhere, even on mainstream media across the globe, like free houses in Japan. And what did you find when you originally kind of got into it before this got so popular?
So yeah, I first associated Akiya with abandoned house at that time. So you know, a dilapidated old building and so on. But then you sort of get into it a little bit more and you realize Akiya just means empty or vacant
Mm-hmm.
house. So it could be, a house that's in perfectly good condition that just no one lives in. And all places in the world have a stock of houses that are empty. And so once I started getting a bit more deeply into it and sort of researching and trying to work out, what we could possibly buy or afford, and I realized it was just not so simple. You think and you see vacant or abandoned houses, everywhere once you get outside of the main cities
Mm-hmm.
into the country a bit, and you think, well, that should be pretty cheap and pretty easy to,
Even free at times.
yeah, for free. You hear about that. And then the reality is it's not so simple in that a lot of these places are sort of vacant and abandoned for, you know, good reasons, whether, the owners have passed away
Mm-hmm.
and the descendants don't want the house, or just there's no demand for a property or a house in that location. There are young people have, mainly left or something like that. So you see, there's all of these different various reasons why houses are vacant, and then you think, okay, then, well, it should be, no one wants them, then people would be, more than happy for you to take them off their hands. And then you go further into it, and then you realize that there's no real incentive for anyone to actually sell them because they're not going to be worth that much. Real estate agents don't aggressively list them or anything like that because for them, there's not much money in it. As a result, very few of these properties are actually, available for sale anywhere.
So when we see on a news headline, Japan has 8 million abandoned homes, the percentage of those that are actually available and with some kind of potential to be turned into something is very small.
Yeah, I when I did one of my first videos way back 5 years ago or
Mm-hmm.
so, I did look into the statistics, and I can't remember exactly right now, but it was something like only 2% of vacant houses were listed for sale.
That's a
And
very
so,
small number.
yeah, so, and then you're looking for one yourself that, fits a sort of particular set of criteria, and you realize it's not going to be so easy.
So what are the criteria you were looking after when you kind of decided more actively then, okay, well, we're in Japan now, everyone's settled, the kids are in school, my wife is at work, my business is kind of on hold for the moment. What were you looking for?
So the main thing we were looking for, I wasn't even looking for a, say, kuminga as such, as a priority in the beginning in particular, but I was looking for a land that was a piece of land that was big enough to have space for kids to play in, and for us to have a garden,
Mm-hmm.
to grow vegetables and things like that, have barbecues and so on, which is, not that common in
No,
Japan.
land is relatively small, generally
Yeah,
speaking.
even in rural areas, the blocks of land are quite small and packed together, to maximize, I guess, the amount of land that's available for farming. Sense, but you sort of have the impression, say, like if you compare it to maybe Australia, once you get outside of Melbourne, you have, much bigger properties, bigger backyards. I'm sure it's changing a bit now, but, I grew up in Australia, in the suburbs in Melbourne and in the suburbs with, a house, a detached house on a pretty big block of land. We had quite a big grass area in the back. We used to call it a paddock. We used to play cricket. It was big enough to play cricket. We could play Aussie rules footy up there and everything. So I had that memory of my childhood, and I wanted to sort of give that to our boys as well. Give them sort of space that they could play outside. Because I knew already that the culture of kids was shifting towards playing games and so on and inside a lot. And I thought, well, if we give them a bit of space outside, then at least it makes it a bit easier to try and spend more time,
because it's difficult for kids, right? If they don't actually have a space to play outside and kind of run around and explore, then they will revert to the consoles. And
but in the end, though, I think where we are, it's pretty good. And there are parks, and there's a sort of culture in the area where we are, where the kids sort of ride their bikes around, sometimes 1-2 kilometers to visit friends, because it's all quite spread out. So even it took me by surprise, even from the first, second grade of primary school. Kids are, say, 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're off riding bikes by themselves on the streets and everything. I was going, oh, is that, saying to my wife, is that okay? Because even when we were in England, didn't get that so much. It usually was accompanied by a parent, taking them to the park at that sort of age.
So the main criteria for you then, size of the land, so that your kids can have some space. And that was already a challenge number one, because most properties don't have that land. But you ended up finding one.
Yeah, so then once I started with that, where am I going to find a block of land that's big enough that will have that space? Then it came to, well, I've got to look at farms. So then once you started looking at farms, you realize that most of these farms a lot of them anyway, have an old house, a cominca, the old folk house on them, the old farmhouse. And so then I was thinking, well, actually that could be good. It might be nice. And you sort of look at the cominca, and you realize, when you're traveling and going out into the rural Japan, that they're just part of the landscape. The profile of the big roof and the tiles and all the thatch, which is not so common these days. And I sort of realized, actually, I've always liked them. I've always been drawn to them without really thinking that much about it, but just that was my sort of image of the rural Japan. And then you start looking at what one of those houses could be like to live in, and you find renovations. You see, some renovations by Japanese people or foreigners, on Instagram or online, various places. And you think, well, actually, that would be really nice to do that. Could be, if we're going to get a farm or a property that was once a farm at least, we're going to get a house like that, then let's sort of embrace that. And, I started really looking at cominca.
The dream builds up.
Yeah, sort of like then it became a block of land plus a cominca is what we wanted. And that's basically what informed our search.
When you are then actively searching, one of the common places to search for are the Akiya banks. But you actually did not find your property through this. I think you got it through an auction.
Yeah, that's right. Because in our area, there is no Akiya bank, I don't think. So at least at that point in time. So what I found was Akiya banks are really kind of up to the local authority, and whether there is someone in the local authority who is, passionate or a champion of Akiya, trying to, or there is someone who really wants to start selling some of the vacant houses in that area. And where we are, they just didn't have it. So there was nothing there. I think in Ibaraki, there aren't that many. We're not too far from Scuba, but Scuba has one. Again, it was quite limited, and it didn't have much compared to some of the other parts of Japan that when I came across when I was looking at Akiya. I was looking for Akiya. And so, we ended up finding a house that was being auctioned off by the tax office. And we found that house being advertised, the auction being advertised in the local paper.
Oh,
But that
wow.
was through a friend of my mother-in-law, who I sort of also got to know partly through the cafe as well.
So
Because
there's.
because I sort of once I sort of got to know some of her friends, or they're all in their 60s,
Mhm.
70s, and I'd do karaoke with them, or she used to host karaoke as well at her kisaten, and had a few drinks with them. I started playing tennis. Well, I was the youngest in the tennis group, and yeah, one of these friends, actually read the local paper, and I'd put out, because we were struggling to find anywhere. I thought maybe word of mouth might be the best way to find if there's some farmer that was retiring and wanted to sell their place or something like that. That's what I sort of imagined. But so I put the word out that we're looking for a place like this, a kaminka, a block of land, and then she saw it, this house advertised in the local paper, the auction being advertised. So she let us know, and so uh, we there was a start price, I think, around about 55.5 million yen. So um, forty thousand
$40,
dollars, forty thousand
$40,000, yeah.
dollars, yeah. And we we're not supposed to really go and look at it. One of the conditions on these auction sites is that you can't visit the property. You
It's an actual condition that you are not allowed to visit and see the place you
Yeah,
might purchase
that's right.
beforehand.
I don't. Well, it's not like I'm not sure if it's like a hard condition, but you can't say, actually, we're interested in this property. Can you give us a key and we'll go check it out? That we
Mhm.
know you can't do that. But they sort of hinted, but this is the address, and if you want to have a look at it, and we don't have a key, you can go and have a look at it though if you want. There's nothing to stop you doing that. And so yeah, we did have a look at it that way, and then we decided, and we're going to have to pay cash as well for it. There was no real way of getting a loan, and then we didn't have that sort of 5.5 million yen in cash. So we
Mhm.
sort of had to say, well, probably, that place is ideal. And I was like, it hurt at the time saying, oh, we're just going to have to pass on. It's just too much. And so the auction went by and no one bid on it, because the condition of the place actually was, if you've seen some of the early videos, it was completely overgrown. And although we'd sneaked in and had a look inside the house and saw it wasn't in such bad condition, I don't think there would have been too many people who would have taken that close a look. And so it would have been just, 5.5 million, and the cost to clean it and renovate it possibly just wouldn't make it worth it.
So when you actually went to the property to kind of have a look at what you may be bidding on, what did you feel when you saw this overgrown place? Was it like there's potential here, or oh my god, this is going to be so much work?
So the first thing was we tried to enter through the front, and it was just full of the bamboo. The not the nice thick bamboo, it's that sasa sort of
Mhm.
thin bamboo. It's quite ugly and quite thick. We just couldn't enter, so we actually went around the back and found just a small little path along the side of one of the agricultural sheds, and we managed to get in. And then you sort of go through the trees, and suddenly there was this small clearing where there was concrete. So it was mostly just low growing shrubs and weeds and everything there. But you suddenly came out of the bushes and trees, and came to the clearing, and then suddenly there was the house. You look up, and the house itself is taller than most kominka. It was actually, we found out later, speaking to the carpenter who built the house, that it was one of the uh, requirements of the previous owner, that he wanted to
Oh,
build it just a little bit taller to make it more impressive. And so he, yeah, so we went and looked, and I just went, wow, this is like a castle, especially as you're looking almost from, you come out of the trees and you look almost straight up, because there's not much space to even look at the place. So I went, once I saw that, I was like, this is amazing. I think I went there before my wife had been there. I came back and I was like, oh, you got to check this place out. This is amazing. And I sort of already had my heart set on it. I hadn't thought about the renovation or anything like that, but I just thought, this place is beautiful. Probably it's worth saving. It's just, you look at it and go, what a waste that it's just sitting there and could possibly just, rot and, fall to pieces.
So when nobody bid on it at 5.5 million yen, you were like, oh, maybe there's a chance here. Maybe they will lower the price. Maybe it will go for open bidding.
That's right, because the first bid was an actual online bid. So they used to auction online or in person. So this first one was online, so I could actually track it. So I could. They still have a set auction time. It's 1 hour, I think, or something like that, even for online. Maybe 1 week. I can't remember actually. But anyway, I sort of kept my eye on it, and even to the last second, I was watching it to see if anyone bid on it. And as soon as it went closed and no one had bought it, then I'd already discussed this with my wife. We were going to then call the tax office and make our own offer.
No.
And so we sort of said, well, we can probably afford 3 million yen if we need to pay cash for it. And so we called them almost the next day, I think, and said, okay, we noticed that the property, because we'd already spoken to them before the first auction to get information about it, and as part of the process of deciding whether we would or would not bid at that first 5.5 million stage. And so we called them and said, okay, no one has bid on it. How about we just buy it for 3 million? And they said to us, well, actually, we can't just sell it. We're required to do it through auction, but we will let you know when the next auction is going to be. And then a few months later, they contacted us, and we're going to do an auction in person in the offices in Mito.
You raise your hand with like higher bid, and
so it was a blind bid. So it wasn't like a competitive bid like you imagine in, say, in Melbourne, where have a whole bunch of people all competing and trying to raise the price like that. So the auction was held in their offices in Mito, Baraki, and they ran through this whole process. So there is a 1 hour window where you can make a sealed bid. So you write down an amount on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, and hand it in. You get one bid. The blind bid, so you don't. So there's and coincidentally or not, the minimum price, the starting price, was 3 million yen. What we said we would pay. So at that point, so you're thinking, okay, the minimum is 3 million. Also, a few other things. There are multiple properties being auctioned at the same time, and so you have. I'm not sure how many. Cause I didn't go in to the actual auction. My wife did. I didn't want to go in because I felt in our little town, our area, I already kind of stood out, and so I didn't want to. I think I didn't want someone to see me and going, he must be bidding on the property that's in that town, because the properties were from all over Ibaraki. So if someone from our town saw me, there's only one property in our town that, near our town that's being auctioned. So I sort of got paranoid about that sort of thing. So we had to decide on what figure we're going to write down on the envelope and hand in. Again, keeping in mind that we don't know if there's any other bidder for the same property. All the people in the auction space were, possibly bidding on other properties, most likely. And then how much above 3 million do we bid? We can't bid too much more. We don't have that much more money. At the same time, we don't want to lose to, like, if we bid 3 million and then someone bids 3,010,000, and then we lose, over that amount. And so we kept on going, okay, we'll start 3,010,000. And I go, but that's quite a round number. Someone else might say 3,010,000. So we got to go 3,010,100. And so we end up coming up to some ridiculous figure like 3,010,000 10,570 or something like that. And so my wife went into the office and had to fill out all the paperwork. And she handed in, and at the end of 1 hour, they announce all the winners of all of the properties. So everyone is sitting in the room, and they announce each property one by one and the amount of the winning bid. And so as they went through, our bid won. And my wife said she was so embarrassed. Hers was the only bid that was like a ridiculous little.
Everyone was like
everyone's 3 million,
100,000.
3 million, 3.5 million, or whatever like that for other properties, not ours. But but anyway, it turned out that there was one other bidder who bid like 3 million, 10,000 or something like that. So we did.
So your strategy worked out.
The strategy worked out. It did. And so it was nerve-wracking in that you just don't know it's how much to bid. And then,
like within this 1 hour, you may or may not become property owner, basically.
Yeah, because you just get one shot. You write your value down, and that's it. And they open them and see who's got the highest value.
And suddenly you have the house. Then you have to pay up for the amount that you bid. And then the whole journey starts. And 4 years later, I think it took you 4 years to kind of renovate it fully from start to finish.
Well, no, because it's still not finished yet. So it took us about a year and a bit to get renovated enough for us to move in. And that was still without, bedrooms being finished. Walls were still bare, drywall, not covered with any paint or plaster or anything like that. But we hired 2 carpenters to do most of the initial renovation. And so they did spend about 12 months at the beginning doing the sort of more structural work and so on.
So let's go to the beginning of this renovation. You finally have the property. Now you drive back to it. The access is still not available because there's still a bamboo grove in front of it. So you go back through the little passageway in between the shed, and now you're standing there. Where do you start? Like, how do you approach? For people that have maybe seen the video, they know what I'm talking about, but it's just overgrown everywhere. There were 2 cars left for rust in the garden. All the belongings from the owners were still there, including things in the fridge. Where do you begin?
So the first thing we needed to do was clear a space to get vehicles in. So I bought a brush cutter and just started cutting through the bamboo, spending the first couple of days doing that, just enough so that we could get a car in, or a small K truck could get in, basically. So that was the first step, and that took quite a lot of time, and this is where we got help from the friends of my mother-in-law and my tennis
your tennis club
as well. And so they came in every day, at least one person at the same time as me when I was in there. They helped in the garden, clearing up all the weeds and so on, cutting everything. And there was sake bottles everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. Seems like they had barbecues before you.
Yeah, I think the previous owner liked a bit of a drink.
How long did it take to clear out all the space, and what do you do with all the stuff? Where do you bring all the weeds, the 2 extra cars that were just left there, and I think you had to tear down a small shed that was rotting, so to say, and what do you do with all of these belongings?
Yeah, so the rubbish that you couldn't just burn yourself, we had to put into the just normal garbage. And so what we did was that you'd have a whole group of people coming in, friends coming and doing helping with the tidying and putting all of the rubbish into the normal bags that you put out for your garbage collection, city garbage collection and just putting it into just those bags. And we had piles and piles of them. And then at the end of the day, everyone would grab 4 or 5 of them and take them to their local garbage collection point, because it was we sort of asked the neighbors, I mean, how many can we put in our garbage collection point? Because, it's only a certain size. You can't you don't want to overload it and other people can't get their garbage in. And they sort of said, if you put 4 or 5 out, should be fine. So we had way more than that. So we were lucky in that my mother-in-law would take 4 to her local collection point. Others who lived a bit further away or in different places take 4 or 5 to their collection point. So that was one thing. Another thing we did was just take stuff to the tip. And in Japan, you, for example, get a K truck, a light truckload of rubbish. You take it to the waste center. They weigh the truck before it goes in, and then they weigh it when it comes out to see how much.
And you pay by
kilogram.
So you don't necessarily pay by what you dispose of, just by the quantity.
That's right, by the weight.
Can you dispose anything there, or
certain things? Yeah, things like TVs. We had a whole lot of TVs that were dumped there for some reason. Those have to go back to the manufacturer, and there's a special method of getting those disposed of. Certain things, tires and have their own special place, but we had so much rubbish that it really was helpful that we could
just bring it
dispose
all
of it
in
to the normal collection points.
The garden is cleared, you have space, you can finally actually look at your property. And one thing that made your property special was it's a kominka. You mentioned earlier you had opportunity to meet the carpenter who built it, so a lot of woodwork, traditional woodwork as well.
Yep.
And a bit taller than usual properties. So when you look at this, how do you know what to do and how to renovate this and how to kind of, so to say, bring it back to its former glory?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact thought process at the time. So that's right. Okay. What we did was we then went to companies that specialized in kominka renovation. When I say kominka, ours is probably not technically a kominka. The house itself is not that old. It was built in the late 80s. It was completed in the late 80s. Okay. Yeah, it was built during the bubble, which is why I think the previous owner ran into a few issues there, because I think that banks were throwing money around at that time, and people were getting the house built bigger than a standard house. So we spoke to the original carpenter who built the house with his brother, who lived down the road, and we asked him if he'd be willing to renovate it for us. And he was in his mid-70s at that point, and he was interested, and he decided in the end it was going to be too much of a project for him at that age, especially
mid-70s, some carpentry work, and
that's right. And he's already said he'd released his apprentice, so he didn't have a second person to help him. I think he'd released his apprentice like 10 years earlier or something like that. So he couldn't reliably get another person to help him with it, and it was going to be a 2-man job. And so we spoke to him, and then we spoke to specialist kominka renovation companies, like, for example, one big one and then one smaller boutique one, and got their sort of ideas on how to renovate it and what it might cost and things like that. We went quite far down the quotation pipeline with a couple of companies there.
Did you decide at that point already how much and what part of the renovation you wanted to do yourself to save on costs? You mentioned before that for the bidding as well, kind of money was a factor in you deciding to kind of get this property at this price. So I imagine you also had a set budget for what you wanted to spend on renovation as well.
Yeah, we had a sort of general idea of what we wanted to spend. And this, I think, I hadn't thought so much about wanting to do a lot of it myself at that point. I think I had the idea that I was going to do something if it was going to help reduce costs, and also because I was interested in doing it anyway. And so I think what happened was, yeah, that's right. We got the original carpenter, and he introduced us to some other carpenters, a father and son team that he knew, and we also that's right. And that's right. We got the designs from the renovation companies, specialist renovation companies, and quotes, and sort of had an idea of what it might cost. One was, as I mentioned, quite a big famous company, and they were really expensive, and the actual renovation, well, we liked the design, but there were going to be quite a few compromises to fit it within our budget at the time. The budget went long time ago, but the initial budget. And then the smaller company was a bit cheaper, and then we also got their sort of idea for the renovation. And then again, through the tennis club, there was a working architect, actually based in Tokyo. I wouldn't say famous, but he had a couple of designs in, I think, one of the sort of Tokyo architectural guides. So he worked with quite a few famous architect firms as well. And he looked at the designs that we'd got from these other two companies, and he's gone, no, I've got much better ideas for this. And then he said, okay, I will come up with a design if you can find a carpenter. And so we had the original carpenter, and that's when he then recommended these other carpenters that he knew to, if we wanted to, do the design that this architect had suggested, they would be willing to do it. And so
the lesson is join the tennis club and the Kisatan.
Yeah, so get to know people in the local community. It sort of ends up, very least just knowing people's nice. But in a smaller town where everyone kind of knows everyone, people are, have connections, and they can help you out with lots of different things.
What's the price range that they were quoting you to renovate the building?
So we kind of said that we wanted to spend sort of a maximum of around 20 million yen. 20 million yen? Yeah, $150,000.
Yeah, probably, depending on the exchange rate.
It could change. So, and they were struggling the big company was struggling to get under that. They were saying, well, 25 million is going to be a lot more realistic. And even then there were going to be quite a few compromises. The smaller company was sort of like, oh yeah, we can probably do 20 million and get most of what you want. Whereas the architect plus the carpenter team, it was well within budget. And then they were also fine with me doing some of the stuff. Whereas the other two companies were like, the big one was, no, you're not going to do anything. We can't. And the other one was like, you could, but why bother? Why bother? Just you could tell they weren't that keen about it. Understandably, obviously.
Well, safety reasons, I imagine. Regulations as well.
Yeah, the big company, they have a warranty on, a 10-year warranty on the house once they do the renovation. So obviously, if you're doing stuff in there, you're kind of voiding the warranty. Whereas the smaller company have the warranty, but they're sort of probably a bit more flexible. They'll come and fix up anything that has gone wrong, probably, and they're not going to get too fussy if you've sort of done something that's not related in particular.
So eventually you went with a local team, the local architect from the tennis club and the local carpenter, and you start work on this property. Now, A lot of people always, like yourself were mentioning, kind of start dreaming about renovating the Kominka, but they are buildings that are sometimes old. There's a lot of wood involved, so wood has a lot of risks of agings. What were some of these kind of surprises you kind of got into as you started renovating, as you started treating the wood and making it a livable space? You're like, oh, wait a second, now we have to fix this because this was not suitable for living.
Yeah, so we were aware of a couple of issues when we first got the place,
Mhm.
and from the first walk around before we even bought it, and there was a couple of leaks in the ceilings in the roof, which is a bit of a worry,
Mhm.
right? So uh, they were the first things we needed to look at, and there was one that we were mostly the most concerned about, and we knew that was going to be one of the bigger issues. But it turned out there was another leak above the doma, the entrance where the genkan is, and that was much worse than we had anticipated, and it kind of required uh, a lot of it to be taken out and rebuilt. So again, with the local carpenters, it wasn't that expensive, and they knew they'd worked on Kuminka before, so they knew how to do it. The father, who was in his 70s, and the son I think was probably maybe 50 or so. The father in particular had grown up building Kuminka, so he he was quite comfortable with just replacing all the rotted wood and putting in the new materials.
So with such a kind of traditional structure and this carpentry as well, how much work goes into kind of putting this back in shape and maintaining it, and what does it take to kind of preserve a little bit some of that originality of the building?
So I think, yeah, I mean, we're sort of looking at trying to balance what I guess trying to balance the traditional aspects of the house with the modern.
Hmm.
It's something that it's a bit tricky. I think not just in Japan, but everywhere. You go to European countries, you have nice old houses, and how much do you modernize? And I think what we looked at when we started the process and talking through with the architect is that, what are the key features of what makes this traditional house, and what makes it interesting, and what makes it sort of a Japanese house. And you look at the big beams. For me, the shoji, tatami, and just the wood in general is something that we wanted to really, you know, preserve, and also put a spotlight on to
Hmm.
make that really the first thing you notice when you go into the house. And so working with the architect, and he had the same vision, and also the ceilings. And one of the things I love about the house is the wooden ceilings. So pretty much all of those things we left as is. And then you also need to think, well, this place is going to be a home. It's not a museum. So what aspects of, say, a modern home did we want? And that was like a sort of more modern kitchen, the bathrooms, toilets, things like that. Pretty much everyone, at least the bathrooms and toilets, would say that they were a modern functional thing.
How complex is it to kind of insert those more modern features, bathroom and kitchens, into these traditional houses that may have maybe older plumbing, older electrical wirings, and also maybe not up to the latest earthquake safety standards?
Yeah, so that is something that I think if anyone buys a place like that is going to have to deal with and probably pay for, because I mean our place was, like I said, only built in the late 80s. So when we got it, it was 30 years old. So even then, the plumbing, the electrical wiring was outdated. It still worked, actually. Once we got the electricity turned on for the house after we bought it, like the first few days, the actual electricity still worked in the house. The
Oh,
lights and everything. The toilet still flushed as well, the
wow.
water. But we got a plumber in quite soon, and they quickly told us, do not use the toilet anymore. The septic tank it had a septic tank. Septic tank was broken,
Oh,
and so cracked, and some of the pipes as well were, too narrow, or also blocked or whatever, and so that needed complete replacement, as well as eventually electrical wiring too, because it couldn't handle modern appliances. So that's a basic. Then trying to put the modern elements in, I think, because the house is made of wood, it makes it quite easy in some ways. It's quite flexible. You can, we change the layout of certain rooms. We left some of the main rooms sort of the same as it was originally built, but some of the bedrooms we changed the layout. But because of the way the house is constructed with post and beam, you can actually be quite flexible where you move rooms and put walls in, as long as you're not sort of removing, structural elements. We didn't remove any beams at all, really, or posts. So, say making bigger bedrooms and expanding it, fitting in a unit bathroom as well. Those things are relatively easy, I think. I think, obviously we had a professional doing it, but I don't think it's something that would be too complicated if someone else was doing it for themselves.
So it took 1 year, you said earlier, to make this place livable, but the renovation is still not finished now, a few years later. Always something to improve. A lot of maintenance also, I imagine. How much of that goes into kind of keeping the wood in good condition, making sure the roof doesn't leak again, and keeping the place as you imagined it?
Well, I probably don't do as much maintenance as I should, but I think generally with a wooden house, as long as you keep everything dry, then it's fine. So on the outside of the house, we have most of the wood is not is just bare wood. It's got the nice patina covering it, silver brown patina, which I really like. And when we spoke to the original carpenter about it, asking him, should we stain this wood or to protect it from the elements? And he said, once you start staining it, you're going to have to keep staining it. But he said, as long as you just leave it like this and the wood's dry, it's going to be fine. You're not going to have problems with termites. You're not going to have problems with rot.
Oh, interesting.
And that's basically what's happened. I mean, the house is modern enough that it sits on a concrete base and foundation, and so it's kept above the elements or the water. You don't get flooding where we are, but if it was light flooding, the base of the house would be fine. And then there's nowhere, as far as I know, as far as I hope, that water is pooling or can pool in the house. And I do walk around. We do have to check the house, not so much for rot or termites or anything like that, but for hornet nests.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they love the eaves of the house. So we do sort of. Also I love the house, so I'm always walking around looking at it and just inspecting it anyway. But apart from that, mostly it's just as it was, the outside of the house.
That renovation journey, you decided to document it on your YouTube channel, Tokyo Llama. What was the idea there? Did you kind of know and imagine already that, oh, this is going to be a really cool, really big project, I want to do all of these videos? Or was it just like, this is a unique house, I want to just have these videos for myself to kind of look back on for what we did and how we kind of approached the renovation?
I think it's a bit of both. So I had already, watched YouTube channels on renovations. Not in Japan, but there are already renovations in Europe, France, chateaus and things like that were already quite popular on YouTube at that time. And renovation channels, like even in England, I used to watch Grand Designs, shows like that. They've always been popular, and I think they will always be popular. So I started thinking, okay, this is an interesting project. I think there might be people who are interested in seeing it. There isn't really anything like it on Japanese houses, at least by a foreigner on YouTube. And so I thought it could be interesting, and I'd been interested in doing YouTube, not more so that it was going to be a new skill. I hadn't done anything like that. I'd always been slightly interested in sort of, say, movie editing or just making something like that, a bit creative maybe. And I thought, okay, it could be quite fun. Maybe some people will be interested in it, but at the very least, it'll be a fun way to document the process of renovating the house, just for myself in the future, and the kids perhaps one day they'll look back and say, oh, this is how we did it, and so on. So I thought, well, there's nothing really to lose if I just film it, put it up there. If some people like it, they'll like it. Maybe I'll get 1,000 subscribers, and that was my goal. Oh, I'll get 1,000 subscribers. A few people might be interested and comment, and I can send it to my friends and family in Australia or other parts of the world. And then, it just sort of took off more than I had imagined or expected.
So some of those videos you're talking about now have 5-6 million views. Your channel has grown more than 1,000 subscribers to a few 100,000, and you're still updating on the house, on the developments of what is happening and what you're working on. How has the YouTube channel maybe affected also the renovation journey, or vice versa?
I think, there are a few aspects of the YouTube channel that have perhaps influenced me. One is that I am a little bit more careful to do a good job on the. I don't always do a good job, but that's I do my best. But sometimes when I'm sort of tempted to go, I just like slap something together here, or I don't. Who cares? Only I will know. Well, I can't really say that when you're filming it and other people are going to be watching it. You think, well, I want to do a pretty good job so I can be proud of it myself. And if I'm going to show someone, I want to be able to say, okay, this is something that I'm proud of, I guess. So that's been a bit of an influence, in terms of doing the YouTube. But also, I do factor in, I'm not going to lie, now when I do a project, I do think, well, this might cost this much money to do, I think I can get a certain amount of views on this video. I'm going to do it anyway, but I am going to at least cover some of say a nicer material or a new tool or something like that I need for this. And it also makes it a bit easier to justify to my wife too. I say, well, she'll go, do we really need this? And I go, well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. But if I do it, I think it'll make the house look nicer, or it'll be good for us. And then, viewers will probably enjoy it and get some ideas maybe. And, there will be a little bit of revenue, not a huge amount, that will cover at least the materials that are used in the video.
Offsetting some of the costs from producing the videos.
But having said that, I don't think there's anything that I wouldn't have done anyway eventually. But it does, maybe it's more that it gives me the motivation. All right, I'll do it. This will be something that I think I can put on YouTube. People might be interested in seeing, good or bad. Whether I do a good or bad job at it, but it's something that helps justify continuing and putting more money into the house. Let's say, because the house is not an investment.
It's a place to live. It's a home.
That's right. It's a home.
And a home that has gathered a lot of attention online, and especially now in recent years. We briefly touched upon it at the beginning of our conversation, but the term Akiya really boomed and gathered worldwide attention. I think especially in Australia and the United States, there's been a lot of interest in acquiring some of these properties. having kind of showcased your journey into acquiring the property, renovating it, and documenting this online, and having so many people engage with you on the topic, what are your perspectives on this kind of Akiya boom and how you see it as someone who's actually done it?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of important to sort of differentiate within the category of Akiya. I think so because not just me, but so I've used the word Akiya to describe my renovation. That some people might think that say a kominka that's what an Akiya is, a kominka, and that all Akiya, the how many million there are in Japan,
I think, is
are
the
all
latest,
beautiful
yeah.
old homes like mine, or older homes than mine. Real, truly old, 100-year-old kominka. But the majority aren't. And so when you hear about, say, free homes and so on, I do think a lot of them should be free, because in a lot of these places there just isn't the market for. There's no market for a house that is, say, in a remote area with not much infrastructure or jobs or things like that. But I think you sort of need to say, okay, not all Akiya need to be saved. I mean, there are a lot of horrible buildings built post-war that are unsafe, not very nice to look at, that probably should just be knocked down. And that's that part of it. But what I would like, I guess, people to think more about, or perhaps get into, and I think I do get contacted quite frequently by foreigners mostly, who say, "Oh, okay, I watched your channel. I decided to buy a kominka and renovate it." Usually foreigners who are already living in Japan, and I think that's what I would want people to focus on. Okay, it's saving the old houses, the traditional kominka, or say a machio, something like that, and that part of the Akiya, I would hope becomes more of a focus than just, say, getting a cheap house, such. Because I think you look around, you probably see it, around the outskirts of Osaka, or the villages there. Not all houses are beautiful and necessarily
So
worth
for you, it's
saving.
more the narrative should be more focused on preserving historical buildings
Yeah,
and craftsmanship, as opposed to acquiring free or cheap properties, which is kind of how it's been portrayed a little bit.
yeah,
And I think with Matthew, who was on the podcast recently, we talked about this as well. He's focused on helping people turn these abandoned places into social community spaces, live houses, and so on, or turn them into business spaces. And I think you mentioned as well, you were like, oh, maybe we can turn this into a warehouse for some kind of business activity. Do you see that conversation happening more, or is the narrative still kind of anchored into getting cheap properties and people contacting you to be like, hey, how can I get a free house in Japan?
yeah. I don't get it so much these days, because I think I've made it clear in a few of my videos that I'm not sort of into really trying to. I'm not a real estate agent, and really into helping people find their own house. But I still think the focus is on the cheap side. I mean, you can get cheap kominka, but yeah, when you hear about foreigners who are interested in just getting a cheap place, I would I would like the focus more to be on, say, saving some of these kominkas that are getting knocked down. I think I don't know the exact statistic, but I did read somewhere that houses like mine, or older ones, are getting knocked down at like huge rates across Japan.
And eventually they're not free or cheap either. You certainly paid 3
Yeah,
million yen for the auction, and 3 million yen, let's say $20,000, is arguably a cheap price for a house. But then the quote you received for renovating this up to livable standards was 20 million yen. So you can basically nearly buy a new property in a rural area as well for that
oh
price.
yeah, and that's what we were warned before we started. and we knew going in, and just we have a preference for an old house that's renovated versus a new house. There's nothing wrong with new houses. Some really nice new houses, but yeah, we were told a lot of Japanese people do renovate their kominkas. A lot of them knock theirs down and build a new house in its place. But so there were people in sort of our sphere that had done it, and they warned it's going to cost to renovate the same as just buying a new home. So I think, though, one thing from my videos that I wish I could get across, and it's hard because we've done it this way, we've spent quite a lot of money on it, way more than the initial budget, as we keep just upgrading. Once we decided, well, I guess that happened early on, but once we decided that this was going to be our forever house, we realized, okay, for our life and our home, we'll just keep improving the house. So, that sort of budget has gone, and now we just sort of look at it more as, can we afford to do this now? If so, we'll do it. Like, we upgraded the windows on the house.
Getting some double paint.
We got double glazed throughout the whole house now, and it's made a huge difference. And that wasn't in the original budget, and it was relatively expensive to do that. But what I was going to say was that our house could have been done much more cheaply, and been livable. It's just that we chose not to, just because I guess we could do it in a way that we wanted to try and get our dream house. But once you've paid for the plumbing, which is not cheap, and electrical wiring, the house with fixing the structural issues like the roof and so on, the house you could have just lived in there. Yeah, the kitchen wasn't particularly nice, but yeah, these are all things. But even the kitchen, the way it was an 80s kitchen, horrible melamine and so on, very low as well. But you could have actually lived in the house at that point. Yes, it would have been cold, and yes, would have been hot in summer too. But you could have done it. If someone is okay with, and millions of Japanese do live in a house like that as it is, without doing any renovation. So I haven't done it, and I filmed a few other renovations in Japan. Other people know what I always wanted to do was find a really cheap renovation and just show what can be done if you're willing to perhaps not live in absolute perfect comfort, and you don't have the biggest budget. So one thing I did wish I could get across better was that, and maybe it is just going and finding another renovation that shows sort of like the other end of the spectrum. But you do need a certain budget, though.
Yes,
the plumbing, electricity, it's hard to compromise on that.
Were there any hidden costs, anything you didn't expect you had to pay for that kind of added on top of your budget?
Yeah, so one of the earlier things was, and I mentioned this in one of my videos, was the property didn't really have an official border.
Oh.
Yeah, because it was originally a farm, and it had the part of the land that was the residential portion, which we bought, which we could buy, but the rest of the land had like rice, like tambo classification, as well as what do you call it, the hatake,
so farmland, which in Japan you can't actually buy unless you have a farming license.
That's right, and it's not so easy to get that license. You need to show that you're actually a real farmer
and intending to farm,
and then depending on where you are, it's and the local authorities, it's easier or more difficult. So where we are, I heard it's a little bit more difficult. You need a certain minimum amount of land, like 5,000 square meters, a proper plan on how you're going to farm it, and so on. You can't be a hobby farmer, really. You have to show that you're a functioning farming business, or
so
you're going
property
to be.
Without borders.
So yeah, so because the property then been broken up into, well, it was always classified that way, but it wasn't really hard and fast to where
Mhm.
the borders were. So we needed to get that sorted because we, for the renovation, we took out a mortgage, and the bank wouldn't loan the money without a clearly defined border, and that ended up costing, I think, getting a surveyor who could do that. More maybe 300,000 yen
So
or so.
$2,000
Yeah.
ish.
So that then those sort of things started, adding up. And then yeah, the other hidden costs in terms of the water damage that we hadn't been expecting, and section that we didn't know about. You know, I don't think probably $1,000 or $2,000 or so.
So some hidden costs, some additional projects, and maybe throughout the renovation process, you want to add something. And you mentioned that even today, you find new projects that you want to kind of add to the house. And what are some of the big projects you want to work on now that the house kind of reached a stage where it's a home, it's very warm, it's comfortable, your family is now living there all together. And what are the things you want to work on and you want to do with your channel as well now that you kind of documented most of the renovation process there, but maybe you have some more plans?
Well, we've really only finished the first floor of the house. I'm just about finished it
Wow.
to the vision that I had in mind. So one of the current projects right now is sort of finishing off the first floor, and that will sort of mark kind of that kind of period
Hmm.
of the renovation. So that's taken 5 years. Of course, a lot of it's me and working very slowly. Uh, but we have a huge attic that's you know big enough, almost as big as the first floor itself. Like it's it's I wouldn't say, yeah, it's a strange one. It looks like it's an attic, but it looks like it could be a complete room,
Oh,
in terms of you can stand up. You don't the side walls are already above head height, so
okay.
it feels like, although of course it's got the cathedral shape and it's got amazing beams and 3 layers that have been carefully cut and joined together. The the potential there is quite
You already know what you
amazing.
want to turn it
Yeah,
into?
I already know it's just going to be a huge, huge project.
Another 5 years?
I hope not as long. I've already our boys now are 14 years old, so turning 15 next year. I already told them that actually now they're old enough that I'm going to need their help to.
You have your own carpenters now.
Yeah, so I have my own assistants there, to hopefully that makes it a bit easier. And yeah, we'll see though. I always underestimate how long a project is going to take me. So, and I want to do this before I start really. I mean, the carpenter's working to 70s, but I can't imagine myself already. In the 5 years I've been doing this project, I already feel like I'm not as strong as I was
Physically tiring.
physically, yeah, as a few years ago.
Looking back on this journey that kind of brought you back to Japan and the renovation of the house you're now living in, what are some of your biggest kind of learnings that you feel like, oh, that was like a great life lesson from this process?
I guess the thing that comes to mind is perhaps to question what I've been told or I've been doing a little bit more. So I think when I look at the few things that I regret on the house, one of the ones that still sticks with me is the gutters. We had these copper gutters
Hmm.
on the house, beautiful copper gutters, but they were in really poor shape. And I was convinced by the carpenters that they needed to be replaced. And, new copper gutters were at now would be way beyond our budget. They're quite expensive. So we ended up just getting vinyl gutters, which are really not the same. And I spoke to the carpenter who built the place later, and he came around and had a look. He goes, "What happened to your gutters?" And I said, "Oh, they were broken and they had holes, and I was advised to get them replaced." And I remember not feeling comfortable with it at the time when I was sort of making the decision. And he goes, I've got a guy who could have just fixed those for you. And I think it was early on in the process, and I was sort of, a little bit like I don't have enough experience to really advocate for myself or what I think could be done to the house or needed to be done. And if I just sort of spent more time going, okay, all right, so we need to, it seems obvious now, but looking back at the time, there's still so much going on, a lot of things happening all really quickly. But I'd just gone, okay, what are the options, or can I speak to another expert on it instead, and really thought a little bit more about it, because that's right. At the time, I was still sort of under the impression that when you hire a carpenter, they have their guys that they've been working with their whole lives, and you sort of buy the package. You hire them. They've got their guys who do all of the gutters for them. They've got their guys their electrician that they've been working with and everything, and they all come together as a package. So I didn't really question that. Sort of as I got further into the process, and this is long after the gutters have been done and replaced, I sort of started speaking like, I want to do something a bit different. I've got another guy who can do something. He goes, oh, that's fine. You call him. I'll just tell our guy that we don't need him for that one, and you can get someone else to come in, and it was completely fine. So I could have just done at that time, said, oh, actually, I've got a quote. I've got some information from another expert who says that we should do it this way. And, I could have just done that.
So ask more questions about
ask more questions and slow things down a bit. No, don't jump into decisions that you're not comfortable with. There's no rush.
When you moved to Japan, you kind of entered that local community through your mother-in-law and her kisaten and the tennis club. But renovating such a property, one that maybe stands a bit taller than all the other properties around, also gathers some attraction, I imagine, from neighbors and people in town talking about you kind of buying this and renovating this. What did you feel was the impact for you in getting that property, renovating it, and moving in there, while having kind of the community around witnessing how it came back to life?
Yeah, I would say, though, I'm not sure that it was that famous locally. I mean, the immediate neighbors, all could see the progress and, came around and had a look and so on. But I guess where we are it's a small little hamlet that only has about 5 to 10 maybe different properties. And yeah, we do also expand the community into we have friends and other parents at the elementary school that we got to know quite well, and they all come around and so on. So I think it is relatively famous, but at the same time I've kept the YouTube channel relatively quiet locally, so it doesn't have, say, Japanese subtitles, or I don't promote it so much within Japan. And one of the reasons is I don't want too many eyes on it in the local community.
So a lot of eyes overseas, but not too many.
That's right, yeah, because I do occasionally, from time to time, get requests to go on Japanese TV to film the house and interview, and I pretty much have always declined.
Okay.
Whereas if it's a sort of a foreign-based TV channel, like I did for the Australian SBS channel, I'm sort of more willing to accept and say yes to those sort of things.
Do you feel like the interest from or what foreign TV channel or foreign audience, or like us here on this podcast, what we are interested in asking about is different than what for them Japanese TV is interested in kind of hearing from you on the house, or is it pretty aligned?
I haven't really got that far though with the Japanese TV to see exactly what sort of angle they were going to come from. But I don't know if you've seen, there are a few Kominka renovations on Japanese TV, and a couple of them, I think I've featured at least a foreigner.
Yeah.
Like a foreigner.
I've seen a couple as well go
Yeah.
by.
Yeah, and they're quite fun. They're quite actually entertaining. If it was something like that, yes, I would be not necessarily interested, but it would be fine. But because I'm doing my own YouTube channel, I kind of prefer that anyway. Just then I can sort of control, the narrative and, show what I want to show from my point of view rather than, perhaps, having some, other, I don't know, I'm not, don't want to say I'm paranoid or anything like that, but, some other angle. But having said that, the Japanese TV shows, when they do the Kominka renovations, those segments are pretty fun.
So maybe one day we'll see you there as well. But for now, what we can expect from you is maybe seeing the development of the attic renovation in the next few months or years, depending on how this moves forward, and maybe some other side projects, side developments. Jaya, thank you so much for coming today. We covered a lot of ground. Is there any specific topic that you would have liked to get into before we wrap up that maybe I didn't ask you about, whether it's about the house, the renovation, or anything that kind of comes to mind?
Nothing really comes to mind. Yeah, I think we covered everything that I was thinking that we would talk about.
So for people interested in Akiya and your journey in particular, they can come to your channel, Tokyo Llama, and have a look at what's going on and have a look at the previous videos where you kind of documented in quite a great amount of detail. And be open to the Akiya conversation, not too much focused on the free and cheap aspect, but perhaps more interested in what can be done in terms of preservation.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's what I would like to be the takeaway. When you look at my channel and what we have done with the house, I think it does showcase the skills and the beauty of Japanese traditional architecture. And yeah, I think you look at what's going on in terms of, these houses being knocked down. There's still plenty, millions around. If you come to Japan, you'll see the landscape still dominated in a lot of rural areas by these style of houses. But I think down the track, we'll start to see less and less, and I think that would be a pity.
So let's try to preserve what we can. Jaya, Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll be back in the next episode. Bye. What a journey. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future conversations. And we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed this episode, here are a couple more that we think you'll enjoy. Thanks again for your support, and we'll see you next time.